Hi guys, welcome to the Tech Chap. In this video, I'm going to test the performance difference between 16 and 32 gigabytes of RAM to see if it's worth paying the extra and getting more RAM. So as you can see, my specs are an i7 6700K processor, both 16 and 32 gigabytes of DDR4 G.Skill RAM clocked at 3200 MHz, along with a GTX 1070 GPU. And I'll be measuring these at 1440p resolution. So I'll be testing a couple of games and also some video editing software from the Adobe suite to see if there is any real-world performance difference between 16 and 32 gigs. So let's start off with Dirt Rally. Putting them side by side, there is actually a noticeable difference between them, with the average FPS for 16 gigabytes coming in at 104.76 versus 110.76 on 32 gigabytes. So it's about 6 FPS higher with 32 gigabytes. Not a significant difference, I'd say, and not one perhaps that you would notice, but still a quantifiably marked difference. Now let's move on to GTA 5, where you can see the FPS counter at the bottom. Again, we've got 16 gigabytes on the left and 32 on the right. And as you can see, as we play the benchmark, there isn't a great deal of difference between them at all. I've paused the video at several times to get an indicator of the frame rate at certain points, and throughout it seems that the 32 gigabyte of RAM spec is about 2 to 3 frames per second higher on average than the 16 gigabytes. So really not very noticeable at all, not anything significant here. So that's a couple of games, but let's move on to some video editing software from the Adobe Creative Suite, because a lot of people want 32 gigabytes of RAM to take advantage of better export times or better rendering times. Once again, we've got 16 on the left and 32 on the right. We've got the control panel open, the task manager showing how much memory is being used, and also the estimated time remaining bar for the Premiere Pro export. So what's interesting is that we're using almost all of the 16 gigabytes of RAM on the left, whereas on the right, even though we are using a little bit more, around 17 gigabytes, we're definitely not taking advantage or taking full use of the 32 gigabytes. And what does this mean in real life? Well, as you can see from the rendering times, the export times, there's almost no difference at all. But of course that's just 1080p, and so if we up it to a 4K export to see if there's any more performance difference, once again we can see on the left that almost all of the 16 gigabytes of memory is being used. Once again on the right it's still not, only a little bit over 16 is being used, so there's a lot spare still. And once again the time is almost exactly the same. There's maybe a 1% difference between them when it comes to the end, a couple of seconds, but really nothing appreciable and nothing, in my opinion, worth upgrading over at this point. So for the final test, let's up the stakes a little bit and have a After Effects and a Premiere Pro export and render simultaneously. In this test, there does seem to be a significant difference between 16 and 32 in the After Effects rendering. It takes just 6 minutes 10 for 32 gigabytes versus 14 minutes 30 for the 16 gigabytes. So After Effects seems to take twice as long when it's got just 16 gigabytes of RAM. As for Premiere Pro, the 32 gigabyte spec finished at 11 minutes 39 versus 11 minutes 49 on the 16 gig spec. So only a 10-second difference there, which works out about a 1 or 2% difference. So really nothing significant there in Premiere Pro. So these have just been a couple of quick tests measuring the performance difference between 16 and 32 gigabyte RAM capacities. Now the difference in price is pretty much double, with 16 gigabytes costing about £84 or $100, and 32 gigabytes costing around £184 or $204 at the time of filming this. So there is a big difference in price, and except for After Effects, really not much of a difference in performance at all. For the vast majority of people out there, from gamers to just general users, 16 gigabytes is more than enough, and you really don't need 32 unless you're going to be using some high-end CAD software like SolidWorks or 3ds Max, or you're a serious multitasker with loads of things going on in the background. Anyway, let me know what you think about the difference here, whether you would go for 32 gigabytes of RAM, maybe even you think 64 is worthwhile. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Please do like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed my video, and I'll see you again right here on the Tech Chat.